Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us here for our downtown dialogues for KEN LUDWIG'S Baskerville. And I have some really fun, amazing people joining me for this conversation. The person next to me is the wonderful director of the show, Shannon Eubanks. The other two wonderful people joining me are writer, director, actress, dramaturg, educator. What else, Suehyla?
Oh, I thought you were going to say Matt's name. I was waiting for you. That's it.
The wonderful Suehyla El-Attar. And our wonderful, glorious leader here at TO, our artistic director and the producer of this show, Matt Torney.
Hello.
So thanks for joining us for this little quick nerd out session about the world of Sherlock Holmes. So I just got really excited. The first question that I want to ask you guys is, what was your introduction to the world of Arthur Conan Doyle and his very famous detective? What was your introduction?
I started reading Nancy Drew at 8 and was over her by 10. So I don't know how I got hold of it, but the first story I read, which almost kept me from ever reading any more Arthur Conan Doyle, was The Speckled Man. And I have a thing about snakes, and I had no idea The Speckled Man was going to be about a deadly pit viper from like India. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So that one scared the pants off me. Then they told me there was one about a big dog. Big dogs, I like big dogs. So big killer dogs, sure, big killer dogs. Snakes, no, big killer dogs, yeah. Hound of the Baskervilles was the one that sort of got me off to the races and buying the collective works and all of that kind of thing.
Oh, wow. So Hound was your second?
Huh?
So Hound of the Baskervilles?
Hound was my second, yeah.
Awesome. How about you, Suehyla?
So I was a Stephen King fan growing up, and delved into Stephen King, but like started off with non-Stephen King stuff. I like The Talisman was the first Stephen King book I read, okay, which was his work with Peter Straub. So moving on, I just stayed in that kind of, I read Lord of the Flies in the 4th grade. This is where my brain was. So this is where we're going. So all of a sudden when I hit my 20s, that's when I started reverting back to children's books. And I went through a really bad breakup and I read Harry Potter. And I ran out of the Harry Potter books that were in existence and I didn't have anything. And the person who lived next door had a collected works of Conan Doyle, of Sherlock Holmes. And so I just started at the beginning and went all the way to the end and just didn't stop through the whole collection. And I remember the moment that stayed with me the most was a comment that Holmes made about someone being an alcoholic, a drunk, not an alcoholic, a drunk. And when asked, how did he know? He said, because you can see the key marks when he tries to come into the house, he takes the key, and because he's drunk, it's constantly scraping the wood around the lock until he can get it in. And that moment for me in the book, or whatever story, like I can't give you titles because I literally just read everything. Like it was just one to the next, to the next, to the next. That moment I was like, I'm in for everything. Also, highly intelligent, unemotionally, emotionally unattainable gentleman. Good at what he does, like fantastic and great. I'm in.
That's hilarious. Matt, how about you?
So, well, my introduction to Sherlock Holmes was the old black and white movies with Basil Rathbone. And I used to watch it with my grandmother because she was very into like old movies and particularly into Sherlock Holmes. So just like, and particularly at Christmas time, just the binges of movies and the marathons that would come on. And I just remember the pipe and the hat, the things that aren't in the books.
We're not in the books.
Right.
I got to go to Gillette Castle
Really?
in Connecticut because, you know, my husband's from there. And I remember I didn't know anything about Gillette. This is how I traveled, guys.
There
I
you go.
wander
And then
into this
you
and
went
I'm
to
like,
the Gillette
oh,
Castle.
this is Caesar thing? Okay. But I walked into this castle and it was like, oh, Gillette Castle, what is this? Oh, look at all this Sherlock Holmes stuff. Oh, this guy, oh my God. it was,
Right.
and he's the one that came up with the hat and the pipe
And the calabash.
The capey.
he gave us the visual for him. So yeah, I'm sorry, Matt. I totally
No. Absolutely. It's just, I think it's a thing. It was all invented, and it's such a strong aesthetic. And you know, Shannon has a good laugh at it in the show.
Oh yeah, that's great.
As well, which I
That's great
deeply
moment.
appreciated. So then I kind of like got to watching the films and then reading the books, and then I got to direct a holiday production of a Sherlock Holmes story at a theater in Pittsburgh. So I got to kind of like live in that world theatrically, Victorian melodrama and super sleuth, and I mean I just love it. I just hooked.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, and that's a perfect transition to the next question, Matt. So what made you choose the show for TO's opening? I was about to say post-pandemic, but but are inviting the audience back into
Sure.
the space.
No, absolutely. So we were looking for a holiday show, and I've always been very inspired by the way theaters in Britain treat holiday shows that are less like specifically about Christmas and more family entertainments around the holidays, and specifically stories and plays that involve adventure. Like the National Theatre did all the Philip Pullman books, you know, his Dark Materials. People are always doing ballet reinventions of grim fairy tales and things like this. So I was like, why don't we approach our holiday programming with a very, very, very simple question? What is something anyone aged 5 to 95 can enjoy? And maybe sometimes it'll be wintry and Christmassy, and maybe sometimes it won't. But the whole idea is that it's about like adventure, fun storytelling. And then I was like looking around for plays, and I came across this one. And particularly for a season that's about coming back to live theatre after some time away, what I love about this is it's a piece for actors, and it's a piece full of theatrical magic. This cannot be a movie. The nature of the comedy, the nature of the transformation, the nature of the quick changes, it's a play. And I was like, well, here we got an adventure story that anyone aged 5 to 95 can enjoy. That is also a love letter to the theatre. And it felt, you know, like, and I think everything this season is a different type of love letter to the theatre, or in love with some different thing that I think makes theatre wonderful. So it just ticked all those boxes. And then, I mean, we assembled this incredible team to put it together, and here we are.
So Shannon, you did so much research before the process started, and you have a cast of just amazingly talented actors. What are some things that you discovered about especially Holmes and Watson, but also about just the world that Doyle created as you were working on the show?
Well, the first thing that I got into was actually with Watson and the interpretation of the character of Watson, because in this play, it's really Watson's mystery. Yeah. It's not Sherlock's mystery. It's incidental. And Lala and I had some long conversations going into it, because our ideas of Watson and the Sherlock Holmes relationship have evolved so much since the early movies, and the sort of ineffectual, overwhelmed with admiration for Holmes' scribe, which Watson has already often been interpreted as, didn't apply given his history as an extraordinary military man. Who has post-traumatic stress disorder. There are all these allusions in the novel. It's actually eerily similar if you say you have a brilliant but quiet doctor given to PTSD, very strong military man who forms an alliance with a charismatic, erratic, very difficult to live with other man, and they are closest of friends. And it's like Poldark. It's this exactly the same setup as Poldark. So what Lava and I talked about was, well, what is the attraction? And what we decided was, what a perfect distraction from preoccupation with the horrors of war and too much self-examination, too much internalizing. But someone who is constantly pulling you into unpredictable situations that engage your mind.
Yeah.
So that's where we started with the relationship between the two of them.
Wow, that's great. That's interesting. Were there any other things that you sort of stumbled across as you were rehearsing the actors?
I'm going to get killed for saying this, but it's true. I had to call two director friends of mine in different parts of the country, both of whom have directed the 39 Steps, and tell them I am not stealing your bits. Ken Ludwig has ripped off some 39 Steps and used it extremely fetchingly in his own play. Ken Ludwig has ripped off himself because he does a dumb show where everybody changes costumes while describing the events that have gone on at the end of Leading Ladies. So I am convinced that this brilliant humorist looked at 39 Steps and went, they're making a fortune. I could do something like that. What's a great literary framework for it? And he went, Sherlock Holmes, it's a mystery. Yes, it's a mystery. Okay, we'll go from there. So in terms of the discovery, a lot of it was considering his source material. How can we be different? I mean, it is that much of a practical challenge and going, let's take it off in a different direction. Now, the individual characters, I had written to the cast before we started rehearsal with ideas of platforms to jump off for them and went, run, be free. So the creativity on the characterizations, while I helped them shape it, but that's their inspiration based on a what if, giving them a what if for each character.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. I mean, we're dealing with such a iconic world that Doyle created. Suehyla, why do you think people keep revisiting this world? I mean, what is it about this world of Victorian England that writers and actors and directors are constantly going back in and remixing and reinterpreting? What's the draw?
My personal opinion, I mean, it's human nature to love a mystery, number one, right? If you're asking why do theaters want to do it, I think it's a recognizable name. So there's going to be that. And then if you're asking why actors want to do it, I think it's some of the meatiest characters that you can work with. The exactly what Shannon was just discussing in regards to the relationship alone between Watson and Holmes. Holmes is a narcissist, and yet in his narcissism, he is somehow the depths of him are shown in the fact that he shows interest in other people, but only for his benefit of his curiosity, right? So that happens to in following the path that Shannon's talking about. You have this war veteran who does have PTSD. When he and Holmes meet, he's not at his, he wasn't at his best. Holmes pulled him out of it because Holmes reminded him that there was a world out here. But what's fascinating about having Holmes be the tour guide into this world is he doesn't really care, right? But Watson has a nature to care. So he's pointed out to see it. And then Holmes goes, this one's too boring. This is too quick. This is not good enough. This isn't, oh, this one's interesting. And Watson's still like, but okay, we're moving here. And you're watching this constant juggle so that even as you see the growth of the characters with one another of Watson kind of even weaning his way from that dependency that's all. I think that's why if you approach it, there could be a two-dimensional approach and you'll get a fine two-dimensional show. If you have a great in-depth jump into it, you will get layers upon layers upon layers in which an audience will not understand why they find the moments relatable, but because those intricacies are already there, because the motivations are always going to be different. There's so much to play with. It's no different than Shakespeare. We are getting something with no stage directions. So we get to decide what happens in these moments with these dialogues. That's why I think so. And I also think it opens itself to so much interpretation, right? You can take these two relationships and bring them about in any kind of story, in any kind of way. And it can be any gender or anything, as long as you always have this person who is the one that's in control and this person who doesn't understand that they can have control. And I think that's why.
Wow. And that brings me to my final question for you guys. Because I'm not, I'm definitely more of a Walter Mosley guy than a Arthur Conan Doyle. I kind of jumped on the Sherlock train because of this TV series on Netflix called The Irregulars.
Oh, you've watched that? Yes,
which is about it's based on the Baker Street Kids.
Baker Street Kids,
and it was absolutely brilliant, and it blew my mind. And what they did with and Holmes and Watson are kind of minor characters in this story, but the way they explore the relationship is fascinating. So I was just like, oh my God, what have I been missing out on? And so I started doing research. And I was like, oh, wow. And then there was this huge article when the show came out about this idea of this, the universe, the Sherlock Holmes cinematic universe, which is what, I guess Robert Downey Jr. is all about trying to make this happen. So The Irregulars was my kind of oh my God point. And then I found out one of my heroes and also one of my favorite writers, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, has a series about Michael Holmes.
About Michael?
Yeah, about Sherlock's brother. I started reading the first one. It is amazing. And so, it's really amazing.
That's Holmes' inferiority complex.
It's his brother.
That's why he's so narcissistic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
His brother.
Yeah.
We have I'm sure we have his mother to thank for that, but we'll get.
So I would love to know from each of you, what's your favorite Sherlock spinoff? Suehyla, yeah.
It's not within the universe, but it's going to be House. The television
House is Sherlock Holmes.
Well, House is Holmes. Wow. Wilson is Watson. That's why I love.
Okay.
Yeah, and the fact that they used it, and again, this comes down to people loving mystery. These are, mysteries are kind of a murder mystery or any kind of mystery is sort of the basic setup for a writer, right? You need to know your end before you can start your beginning, and if you know where you're going, then it will be that much easier for you to get there. You can't write a mystery without knowing where you're going. You have to know where to go. So I think setting that kind of stuff up is great, but then to use it in the medical field, I mean, come on. It was, and I remember a friend of mine said jokingly when House first came out, she goes, my husband and I have decided that if we ever get sick, we don't want to go to House's hospital. And I was like, he's a specialist. He's a specialist. He's supposed to work with the things that nobody else can solve. It's not that he doesn't know. And you know what? Within 45 minutes, he will figure it out. So it doesn't matter.
Suehyla, I have to ask you, do you know how Hugh Laurie ended up getting that part? There is a story.
Tell me, because I'm don't tell my husband, but I'm in love with Hugh Laurie. Okay. Go ahead.
He almost didn't get that part. The casting director was talking to a number of British actors. The executive producer, who had seen various screen tests, said, no, I'm quoting, I don't want any limey bastards in my show. So more American scented screen test, not finding. Casting director calls Hugh Laurie's agent to say, is there any way I can get him on tape for this playing an American doctor? They said, he's in the middle of the desert shooting Flight of the Phoenix right now. Well, Hugh Laurie didn't have time. He's in the middle of shooting a movie to read this. The problem had been so many actors were going, it's the title role. They were trying to humanize House. They were trying to make him three-dimensional. Hugh Laurie's in the middle of the freaking desert, gets the sides, goes, oh, this guy's a rat bastard, fine. Somebody put me on tape, plays him for the absolute asshole that he was, thinking it's a supporting part or it's what sends it off and forgets about it. Executive producer goes, that's our House.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know who broke the news to him that a limey bastard had actually gotten the part, but somebody had to. But it's because he had limited information. He played the part exactly as written.
And I think that says everything, because that also is a tribute to the writers. That means that it came off the page, as long as nothing else was around there to distract the actors or, you know, anything like that. That's everything to the writers. So yes, that's my favorite adaptation. So when you were talking about the Sherlock universe, I was like, I mean, it's fine. Yes, if you want me to go into the Sherlock universe, Sherlock. Cumberbatch is one of the best. And maybe the first 2 or 3 seasons only. And the way they modernized it and showed how all of that was, and also I might like it because they referenced that story I was telling you about that stuck out in my head. So there were a lot of moments that I felt were going back to the source material and trusted the source material instead of feeling like they had to compensate for something in the source material, which also House doesn't do. He's just he's not a bad person. He's just not a good person. You know?
Oh, that's a great, yeah, no, House is totally Sherlock Holmes. That's insane.
Listen to the name. Holmes, House.
Holmes, House.
Wilson, Watson, yeah.
Wow. What about you, Torney?
Has to be Sherlock. It has to be Cumberbatch, and specifically their version of Hound of the Baskervilles. Because that episode, which is I think it's like almost the length of a feature film. Like the way they modernize the Hound is that it's a chemical weapon that's being developed by the army to make people hallucinate.
Oh, wow.
So the whole thing is that Sherlock Holmes, because I think what appeals to me about the spinning of it is that here is a man whose mind is better than a computer. The human mind is better than a computer, rather than the mind. It just sort of spins it in a very modern way. But then suddenly he can't get his mind around these dogs, and then he sees it, and he doesn't trust his own mind. And then, speaking of him being an asshole, he arranges for Dr. Watson to get dosed with this hallucinogen just to see what happens.
Yeah.
And and you're watching it, just being like, this is a group of writers who have been given a very long leash to basically take this material and do something with it. And I mean, I just think it's amazing because the kind of artistic creation of it has a kind of Holmesian cleverness, as well as Holmes having Holmesian cleverness. So I'm a sucker for that.
What about you, Shannon? What's your favorite?
If we put the two polar opposites as Benedict Cumberbatch on one end and Robert Downey Jr. on the other, and the essence of both is completely different, because in Downey it's kinetic. Everything is kinetic. It is externalized. And with Benedict Cumberbatch, it's internalized. It's cerebral. I prefer the kinetic because my experience, Suehyla, with brilliant, emotionally remote men has turned me off to brilliant, emotionally remote men. So it's entirely visceral and personal, is that I like my assholes untidy rather than controlled. Okay.
I mean, Shannon, I love that you think that we have control over the assholes, but you do you. You do you. I'll take tidy. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it all comes down to personal taste.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I have to say before we got read, I was a little nervous because I haven't read Holmes in a long time. And it's funny because I'm not a Conan Doyle person, right? I'm never somebody that belongs to an author. I'm somebody who belongs to the characters. And so it doesn't matter what the author has done and anything else. It's the character that I'm going to be drawn. Shocking, I'm an actor. But I went to go make sure that I was still on top of my, my stuff. And I went to go read about Gillette. And what I thought was really interesting is that when you go to read about Gillette, they talk about him as an actor, that he doesn't move, that even when he was embodying, especially when he was embodying Holmes, he managed to hold an audience on the edge of their seats because they were waiting to see what the next move of his body would be, what the next thing would be. And I thought Holmes is all internal because he's computing, much like Matt is saying, the computer's doing all the work, and then he doesn't move until it's time. And so that's why I'm drawn to that kind of Holmes. Robert Downey Jr. is extremely attractive.
There is that.
And then
There is
full stop.
Also,
no.
Robert Downey Jr. His Holmes can fight. Like that's what I remember in that first movie.
That's true.
He's a brawler, he's like using his mind computing skills for how to beat people up.
Yeah.
I mean, Holmes avoided fights because of the fact that he could outwit anybody. Like he would just end up placing them in a situation, or he would just manage to find his way out. So he never, I felt like he didn't. Yeah. So, and maybe I'm just an old-fashioned person.
That's all I got. Thank y'all for coming here on a Sunday to nerd out about Sherlock Holmes to my entertainment, and hopefully the people that watch this. So come and see KEN LUDWIG'S Baskerville here.
How much longer is it running?
How much longer is it running? What, 2 more weeks?
19th.
19th is the last day.
Yep.
So if you got time to see it and you're watching this video, come check it out. It is an absolute blast. Thank y'all so much.
Thanks, Addae.
Night, everyone.